The sky above Velar Prime had not been blue for 3 galactic cycles. Instead, it burned orange and red, filled with the light of enemy ships and the constant flash of weapons fire. The people had once looked up at their sky with wonder. Now they looked up with fear. Ambassador stood at the tall window of the command center. Her blue-green skin reflected the fires burning in the distance. Her large, dark eyes watched another section of the orbital shield flicker and die. She was tired. Everyone was tired, but there was no time to rest. Behind her, the command center buzzed with activity. Officers ran between stations. Alarms rang every few minutes. The screens showed nothing but bad news. The collective had surrounded their world with over 400 warships. The defense fleet had only 17 ships left, and most of them were damaged. Elder walked slowly toward. He was old, even by standards. His skin had faded to a pale green, and his movements were careful and measured. But his mind was still sharp, and his voice still carried weight. "Ambassador," he said softly, "the shields in the eastern sector will fail within 2 rotations. We must begin moving civilians to the underground shelters." Did not turn from the window. "And how long will those shelters protect them, Elder? A day? A week? They will dig them out eventually." Had no answer. They both knew the truth. The collective did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They consumed. Every civilization they conquered was stripped of resources, people, technology, minerals, everything. Then they moved on to the next world. "Have we received any response from the Galactic Council?" asked. Silence was answer enough. Finally turned away from the window. Her expression was calm, but inside she felt the weight of her entire species pressing down on her shoulders. She had sent messages to every member of the council. She had begged for help. She had offered trade agreements, territory, anything they wanted. The responses had been the same: words of sympathy, expressions of concern, and then nothing. The great powers of the galaxy had decided that Velar Prime was not worth saving. The cost of fighting, though, was too high. The risk was too great. One council member had even suggested that they should surrender and hope for mercy. Had wanted to scream at him. They had no mercy. Everyone knew this, but knowing and acting were 2 different things. She walked across the command center to the communications station. Lieutenant sat there, her fingers moving quickly across the controls. She was young, too young to be working in a war zone, but the war had taken so many officers that even the young had to serve. Said, "Prepare one final distress signal. Broadcast it on all frequencies. Send it everywhere, every sector, every system, every station. Let the galaxy know what is happening here." Looked up with uncertain eyes. "Ambassador, we have already sent so many messages. No one has answered." "I know," said, "but we must try one more time. If we are going to die, let the universe remember that we asked for help. Let history record that they did not go quietly into the dark." Nodded and began preparing the signal. Watched her work, then turned back to the window. Outside, a patrol ship exploded in a bright flash of light. Another crew lost. Another family destroyed. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer to the old gods of the deep oceans, the gods her grandmother had taught her about when she was a child. She did not really believe anymore. How could anyone believe in gods who allowed such suffering? But the words brought her comfort, and comfort was rare these days. The distress signal launched into space, carrying the desperate plea of a dying world. It would travel across the void, passing empty systems and silent stations. Most who heard it would ignore it. Some would feel sorry but do nothing. That was how the galaxy worked. But did not know that somewhere, far across the stars, someone was listening. 2 hours later, suddenly sat up straight in her chair. Her eyes went wide. Her hands trembled as she checked her readings again and again. "Ambassador," she called out, "I am detecting something, a ship signature. It just appeared from uncharted space." Rushed to the station. "Reinforcements." No, said, her voice shaking. The energy readings are completely different. I have never seen anything like this in our database. It is not any species we know. Elder joined them, looking at the screen. One ship, just one. Yes, Elder, but the power output is enormous, and it is heading directly toward the blockade. Stared at the small dot on the screen. One ship against 400. It was madness. Whoever they were flying to their death. Then a transmission came through. A voice spoke in clear galactic common. It was calm and steady, without fear. Velar Prime, this is the HSS Indomitable of the Terran Republic. We received your distress call. We are here to help. Had heard of humans, a young species from a small blue world. They had only recently joined the galactic community. They were not powerful. They were not important. Why would they come? But as she watched that single ship burn toward the enemy fleet, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. Hope. The HSS Indomitable dropped out of hyperspace with her engines still glowing hot. She had traveled for 3 weeks without stopping, burning through fuel reserves that should have lasted 6 months. Her crew had not slept properly in days, but none of that mattered now. Captain Park stood at the center of the bridge. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and a face that showed the marks of many years in space. His dark hair was cut short in military style, and his uniform was neat despite the long journey. His eyes were fixed on the tactical display in front of him. 400 enemy warships, 1 human cruiser. Any reasonable person would turn around and leave, but had not become a captain by being reasonable. Report, he said, his voice calm and steady. Commander stepped forward. She was his executive officer and the best tactical mind he had ever worked with. Her black hair was tied back in a tight bun, and her eyes were sharp as she read from her. Sir, we are counting 412 vessels, mostly cruisers and destroyers. They have 1 dreadnought that appears to be the flagship. The defense fleet is down to 17 ships, all showing heavy damage. Nodded slowly, and the planet. Orbital shields at 37% and falling. Population centers are under bombardment. Estimated civilian casualties are already in the millions. The bridge was silent. Every crew member had heard the numbers. Every one of them knew what they were facing, but not a single person suggested retreat. That was not the human way. A communication alert sounded. Check the signal. Sir, they are hailing us. They want to know who we are. Put them through. The main screen flickered and a face appeared. It was the Admiral, a creature with skin, 4 eyes, and a mouth filled with sharp teeth. His voice was deep and rough, like stones grinding together. Unknown vessel, you have entered collective territory. Identify yourself and withdraw immediately. This is your only warning. Looked at the screen without fear. This is Captain Park of the Terran Republic. We are here in response to a distress call from Velar Prime. The Admiral made a sound that might have been a laugh. Terran Republic, I have never heard of you. You are clearly a minor species with no understanding of galactic politics. Leave now, or you will be destroyed. I understand your position, said. Now let me explain mine. Velar Prime is under the protection of the Terran Republic. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw your forces. This is not a negotiation. The Admiral's 4 eyes blinked in surprise. Then he laughed again, louder this time. 1 ship. You bring 1 ship against our fleet and make demands. Your species is either very brave or very stupid, perhaps both. Perhaps, agreed. You have 1 hour. He signaled to cut the transmission. The screen went dark. Commander raised an eyebrow. Sir, do you think they will actually withdraw? No, said, but I had to give them the chance. That is what separates us from them. He turned and walked toward the engineering station, where Chief Engineer was working. Was a large man with thick arms and hands covered in old scars from years of working with heavy machinery. He looked up as the captain approached. "Chief, how is our special weapon?" Smiled, a rare sight from the serious engineer. "The Singularity Lance is fully charged and ready, Captain. Those have no idea what is about to hit them." The Singularity Lance was humanity's secret. During the unification wars on Earth, humans had nearly destroyed themselves with nuclear weapons. But from that destruction, they had learned. They had developed new technologies, new ways to channel the power of the universe itself. The Singularity Lance could create a small black hole, a tear in space that would crush anything nearby. No other species had this technology. The Galactic Council did not even know it existed. Today, they would find out. Walked back to his command chair and sat down. Around him, his crew prepared for battle. Weapons officer ran final checks on all gun batteries. Navigation officer plotted attack patterns and escape routes. Medical teams stood ready in the lower decks. The hour passed slowly. They did not move. They were waiting, confident in their numbers. When the countdown reached 0, stood up. "All hands, battle stations. This is not a drill. We are going to engage the enemy and break the siege of Velar Prime. Many of you have family back on Earth. Many of you have dreams you still want to achieve. I cannot promise that all of us will survive today. But I can promise that what we do here will matter." The called for help when no one else answered. We answered. That is who we are. That is what it means to be human. He paused and looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. They were scared, but they were ready. "All batteries, free fire. Show them what humanity learned in the unification wars." The Indomitable surged forward, her weapons coming alive. And across the void, 400 ships prepared to learn a lesson they would never forget. The Admiral gave the order to fire, and 400 ships obeyed. The void of space lit up with streams of plasma, missiles, and energy beams. All of it aimed at one target. All of it meant to destroy the small human ship that dared to challenge them. On the surface of Velar Prime, the watch through telescopes and scanners. Ambassador stood in the command center, her breath caught in her throat. This was it. The brave fools who had come to help them were about to die. But then something impossible happened. The Indomitable did not explode. Her shields flared bright blue as they absorbed the attack. Every shot, every missile, every beam, all of it stopped cold. The ship kept moving forward, pushing through the storm of fire like a stone through water. "How is this possible?" Elder whispered. "No ship should survive that." Had no answer, she could only watch. On the bridge of the Indomitable, Captain stood firm as his ship shook from the impacts. Warning lights flashed. Alarms rang, but the shields held. "Shield status," he called out. "Holding at 82%, Commander reported. "Their weapons are not as powerful as we estimated." Allowed himself a small smile. Human shield technology had been developed to survive nuclear explosions. Compared to that, plasma cannons were almost gentle. He said to his weapons officer, "Target the flagship, fire the Singularity Lance." Weapons officer was a young man with steady hands and calm eyes. He had trained for years for this moment. His fingers moved across the controls with perfect precision. "Lance charge, target locked, firing." The Indomitable shuddered as a beam of pure darkness shot from her bow. It was not light. It was the opposite of light, a stream of compressed gravity that bent space itself. The beam crossed the distance to the flagship in less than a second. What happened next would be remembered in the histories of 100 worlds. The Dreadnought, a massive ship nearly 3 kilometers long, began to collapse. It folded inward like paper being crushed in a fist. Metal screamed and broke. The ship's reactor exploded, but even the explosion was pulled into the gravitational tier. 17 other ships nearby were caught in the effect. They spun wildly, pulled toward the dying flagship, and were crushed together in a ball of twisted metal and fire. Then it was over. The Singularity collapsed. Where the flagship had been, there was only empty space and floating debris. The fleet went silent. For a long moment, no one moved. No one fired. They could not understand what they had just witnessed. Captain did not give them time to recover. All secondary batteries open fire. Navigation, take us into their formation. Let us show them that humans do not fight from a distance. The Indomitable charged forward, her guns blazing. She was like a wolf among sheep, tearing through the confused enemy fleet. Coordinated the attacks, calling out targets and firing solutions. Every shot found its mark. Cruisers exploded one after another. Navigation officer was a small woman with quick reflexes and a brilliant mind for spatial geometry. She flew the massive cruiser like it was a fighter craft, dodging between enemy ships, using their own formations against them. They could not get clear shots without hitting each other. On the surface, they watched in stunned silence. Ambassador felt tears running down her face. She did not wipe them away. "They are winning," Lieutenant said, her voice full of wonder. "One ship, they are actually winning." Elder lowered his head. "I did not believe it was possible. I thought we were watching them die. Instead, we are watching them save us." The battle raged for 2 hours. They tried everything. They attempted to surround the human ship. They tried concentrated fire from multiple angles. They launched boarding pods that were shot down before they could attach. Nothing worked. The Singularity Lance fired 3 more times. Each time, dozens of ships were destroyed. The weapon needed time to recharge between shots, but the secondary batteries kept the pressure on during those moments. The formation broke apart. Ships began to flee in random directions, abandoning their positions. Their communications became chaotic, screams, orders, accusations. Some captains blamed each other. Some simply went silent. Captain watched the enemy scatter. There was no joy in his face, only grim determination. He knew the battle was not over yet. They still had ships. They could still regroup. They could still win if humanity made a mistake. "Do not let them escape," he ordered. "Any ship that reaches hyperspace will bring reinforcements. We end this today." The Indomitable continued her hunt, chasing down fleeing vessels and destroying them before they could jump away. It was brutal work, necessary work, the kind of work that humans had learned during their long, bloody history. By the end of the 3rd hour, the fleet had been reduced from 400 ships to less than 100. The survivors gathered together, forming a defensive cluster far from the planet. They were no longer attacking, they were waiting to see what the humans would do next. And on Velar Prime, millions of looked up at a sky that was finally growing dark again. The fires were fading. The enemy was retreating. For the first time in 3 galactic cycles, they dared to hope they might survive. The remaining ships had gathered into a tight formation. They were scared now, but scared enemies were often the most dangerous. They had nothing left to lose. Captain studied the tactical display. 94 enemy ships remained. His own ship had taken damage during the long battle. The shields were down to 40%. Several gun batteries were offline, but the Indomitable was still fighting. "Sir," Commander said, "they are concentrating their fire. They are trying to overwhelm one section of our shields." Nodded, they finally learned. Navigation, rotate the ship, spread the damage across all shield sections. Executed the order, spinning the cruiser to present fresh shields to the enemy. But the had adapted. They split their remaining fleet into 3 groups and attacked from multiple directions at once. The Indomitable shook violently as hits landed across her hull. One shield section failed, then another. Plasma bolts began striking the armor directly. "Hull breach on Deck 7, someone shouted. "Fire in the engine room." Damage control officer grabbed her equipment and ran toward the emergency. She was a tall woman with strong arms and a face that showed no fear. She had served on 5 different ships and survived 3 major battles. This was what she was trained for. She reached Deck 7 and found chaos. A plasma bolt had torn through the outer hull and ignited several compartments. Crew members were fighting the fire with extinguishers, but they were losing. The automated systems had failed. "Everyone out," ordered. "I will seal this section manually." Her team protested. The manual controls were deep inside the burning area. Going in there was suicide. Did not listen. She grabbed a breathing mask and ran into the flames. The heat was terrible. Her uniform began to smoke, but she kept moving, climbing through twisted metal and broken pipes until she reached the emergency controls. She pulled the lever. Heavy doors slammed shut, cutting off the damaged section from the rest of the ship. The fire was contained. The ship was saved. Collapsed against the wall, her arms burned and her lungs aching. Her team found her minutes later and carried her to the medical bay. She would live, but she would carry the scars forever. On the bridge, the situation grew worse. A concentrated barrage struck the command section directly. The ceiling cracked. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Commander was thrown from her station by the impact. She hit the floor hard and did not get up. Rushed to her side. Blood was flowing from a wound on her head. Her eyes were closed. Medical officer arrived within seconds. She was a small woman with gentle hands and a calm voice that could soothe anyone. She checked injuries quickly and efficiently. "She has a concussion and possible internal bleeding," reported. "She needs to go to the medical bay immediately." No, eyes opened. Her voice was weak but determined. "I am staying here. Give me something for the pain and let me work." Looked at the captain, hesitated. He needed his executive officer, but he also could not ask her to risk her life further. "Do what you can," he finally said. "But if you pass out, I am dragging you to medical myself." Managed a small smile. "Understood, sir." Gave her an injection and helped her sit up against a console. Began directing damage control operations from the floor, her voice growing stronger as the medicine took effect. The battle continued. The Singularity Lance fired again, destroying another cluster of ships, but the weapon was reaching its limits. Chief Engineer reported that the power core was overheating. They could fire perhaps 2 more times before the Lance burned out completely. "Make them count," ordered. The fleet was down to 60 ships, then 40, then 23, but each victory cost the Indomitable more. Another hull breach, another fire, another crew member injured or killed. Received the casualty reports without expression. 37 dead, over 100 injured. Each name was someone he knew, someone he had trained with, eaten with, laughed with. Now they were gone. This was the cost of being human. This was what it meant to care about others. You did not just fight for yourself. You fought for people you had never met, for a world you had never seen. And sometimes you paid for that with blood. The final ships broke and ran. This time did not pursue. The Singularity Lance was depleted. The engines were barely functioning. The Indomitable had nothing left to give. But it was enough. "Sir," Lieutenant's voice came through the communication system from Velar Prime. "They are retreating. All enemy ships are leaving the system. The siege is over. You did it." The bridge crew did not cheer. They were too tired, too hurt, too aware of what they had lost. But Captain allowed himself a moment of relief. He looked at his wounded ship, his wounded crew, and he felt proud. They had come across the galaxy to help strangers. They had faced impossible odds, and they had won. He opened a channel to the planet below. "People of Velar Prime, this is Captain Park of the Terran Republic. The fleet has withdrawn. You are safe." Then he sat down in his command chair and let out a long, slow breath. The battle was over. Now came the harder part, finding a way to heal. The sun rose over Velar Prime for the first time in 3 galactic cycles, without the shadow of enemy ships blocking its light. They emerged from their shelters and bunkers, blinking at the unfamiliar brightness. Children who had never known peace looked up at the clear sky with wonder. Ambassador stood in the ruins of what had once been the central plaza of her city. Buildings were destroyed, streets were filled with debris, but her people were alive. That was what mattered. Elder walked slowly through the crowd, helping where he could. His old bones ached, but there was work to do. There was always work to do after war. Ambassador, Lieutenant called out, the human ship is hailing us. They wish to send a delegation to the surface. Straightened her clothing and tried to make herself presentable. It was difficult. She had not slept in days. Her robes were torn and dirty, but she would meet these humans with whatever dignity she had left. Tell them we would be honored to receive them, she said. An hour later, a small shuttle descended from orbit. It was battered and showing the damage from the battle, but it flew steady and true, landing gently in the plaza. The door opened and humans stepped out. Had seen images of humans before, but seeing them in person was different. They were strange creatures, soft skin, small eyes, no scales or gills. They seemed fragile compared to and yet these fragile beings had just destroyed an empire's fleet. Captain Park walked at the front of the group. He moved with a slight limp, an injury from the battle that he had refused to treat until his crew was cared for first. His face was tired and there was a bandage on his forehead, but his eyes were kind. Behind him came Commander, walking with help from Medical Officer. Had insisted on coming despite her injuries. She wanted to see the people they had saved. Stepped forward and bowed deeply, the traditional greeting of highest respect. Captain, on behalf of all the people, I thank you. What you have done today, we can never repay. Bowed in return, copying her gesture as best he could. Ambassador, we are glad we arrived in time. Elder approached slowly. His eyes studied the human captain with curiosity and something like confusion. Captain, if I may ask, why did you come? The Galactic Council declared us a lost cause. Every major power refused to help. Your species is young. Your resources are limited. Why would you risk so much for people you have never met? It was the question everyone wanted to ask. The question that had kept awake during the long nights of the siege. Was quiet for a moment. Then he turned to his shuttle and gestured for the others to follow. Come, he said, let me show you something. They walked into the shuttle. It was a simple military transport, functional and plain, but along the walls noticed something strange. There were small plaques, each with names written in human script, hundreds of them, thousands. These are memorial markers, explained. Names of humans who died in our history, wars, famines, diseases, times when our species almost ended. He pointed to one section of the wall. These are from our world wars, conflicts where humans killed over 100 million of our own kind. We burned our cities. We poisoned our air. We came very close to destroying ourselves completely. Listened in silence. She had not known this about humans. We learned from that pain, continued. We united our world. We built new technologies. We reached for the stars, but we never forgot what we went through. We made a promise to ourselves, a promise that is written above every memorial on every human ship. He pointed to a line of text engraved in metal above the plaques, read the translation that appeared on her communicator. Never again for anyone. We swore that if we ever had the power to help others facing extinction, we would, said. We would not look away. We would not calculate costs and benefits. We would simply act, because we remember what it feels like to face the end alone. Tears fell from his eyes. She did not try to hide them. You called for help, the captain continued. Across the void we heard you, and we came. That is what it means to be human. Elder lowered his head. We judged your species poorly, Captain. We thought you were young and foolish. We did not understand. Few do, replied. The Galactic Council fears us now. They do not understand why we fight for others. They think we want power or territory, but that is not who we are. He looked out the shuttle window at the gathering in the plaza. Children were playing among the rubble. Adults were beginning to rebuild. Life was continuing. We fight because every thinking being deserves a chance to live. Every civilization deserves the opportunity to grow and learn and become something greater. The universe is vast and cold, ambassador. We do not have to make it. The Indomitable remained in orbit for 3 more weeks. Human engineers helped repair systems. Human doctors treated the wounded. Human soldiers helped clear debris and search for survivors. When the cruiser finally departed for home, her hull still and her crew still recovering, they gathered on the surface to watch. They sent a message of thanks that was broadcast across the galaxy, a message that described what humans had done and why. The Galactic Council received that message. They discussed it in their chambers with concern. These humans were unpredictable, dangerous. They did not follow the rules of galactic politics. But on 100 worlds, other species heard the message too, species who had been abandoned, species who had given up hope. They heard about the ship that came when no one else would. They learned the words written on human memorials. Never again for anyone. And they began to believe that perhaps the galaxy was not as cold as they had thought. Perhaps there was kindness in the void after all. The Indomitable limped toward home, her mission complete. She would be repaired. She would fly again. And when the next call for help came from somewhere in the darkness, she would answer. Because that was who humans were. That was what humanity had chosen to become. Not conquerors, not rulers, but guardians standing watch in the endless night, ready to roar out of the void whenever someone somewhere needed them. And the galaxy would never be the same.